This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so looking at our agenda, are you ready, Pam?
I am, yes.
Okay.
So we'll call the meeting to order and see if there's any comments. Obviously we don't need introductions, I guess. Good morning, Jason, by the way. How are you?
Jason doesn't have a microphone, I don't think, on his computer.
Okay.
I'm here. Sorry about that.
No worries. Good morning. Any comments about the meeting summaries from February, which seems very long ago, and so does April. I scanned through them quickly and nothing jumped out at me. Susanna, any comments?
Yeah, the same thing. I didn't, oopsie, wait a minute. I have the wrong notes in front of me. Let me just, no, they're all just comments on today's stuff. So yes,
Right.
It's so hard when it's so long ago, but we are catching up. Is that right?
Slowly but surely.
Okay. I just want to ask on my screen. I don't know what's on my screen. My eyesight.
That's a good question. You're seeing my email. Hold on.
Okay, my eyesight isn't good enough to see.
Okay, now you should have the agenda up.
So, is it appropriate to just have comments from us as, what are we? Committee members?
Yes.
Sometimes in meetings, there's an kind of relate general input. Can I speak to that? I'm still, yes, that okay?
Yep, good with me.
So, and Pam?
Certainly, yes.
Okay. I'm still struggling with page numbering. You know, in legal things, they have all these sub paragraphs and ABCs, and you know, they have lots and lots of ways that I identify precise things, and I find it really hard to deal with how do you, without copying everything out, which is another layer of work, which is going to take me then to the countywide meeting. But the other thing, I have learned to keep open another tab. My computer is a little slow, but another tab that I can scroll through everything. So I'm not sure where it is. I haven't tried to get to it today. So maybe this is it hiding behind. Oh, yes. No. Is this it hiding behind? No. Now I think I've lost, wait a minute, where's the go-to meeting? It was very helpful on the general thing because I could go between another tab that had the whole draft plan that was in front of us last meeting. So I can go to the page that I want to and comment on it, which when Gail, on your end, on the meeting window, it's only what you're showing us. Actually, I think I'm not in that right.
Yeah, I think, Susanna, and I forget every month, even though I think about it when I start to put page numbers on our agenda, so I apologize. I do think about it, but then I never remember at the end of the process. So when we get to the individual plans, I do have them in Word also, which won't help with your page numbering. but it will at least give us the ability to pull it up and we can make edits to it as we go along. And I will try for November and December to remember to put page numbers on the agenda.
Okay. And of course, now I've kind of, okay. Are your emails still your emails are still kind of in the background, right?
No, you should be seeing the agenda package for today.
Yeah, there's just something in the background. Anyway, no matter. I'm just
No,
was hoping.
it's not that background, it's my thumbnails, so I can scroll down and skip to a page quickly.
Okay. Is that possible for us?
If you're looking at the document as a PDF, somewhere on your program, depending on what you're using, probably on the left side, you may see a bunch of tabs and little icons. And if you see one that looks like a stack of papers or something that says thumbnails, that will
Okay.
pull that up for you.
You know what? I have to ask my daughter. She's the one who helps me with this. I'm not seeing it on my Mac. And do you have a Mac? You probably don't have do you have a Mac?
No, we don't.
Yeah. I mean, my setup is different than yours, so so the icon is stack of paper, and then when it's up there, I can scroll through and click on it and it'll pop open.
Yep.
Okay. So it looks like a stack of papers, and they're also thumbnails, right?
Correct.
Okay. So then there's one other thing, which is dealing with all of this more definitely on the countywide meetings. Sometimes and they go on long and I get tired, I slow down. I had asked for what we're voting on to be read out. I loved it last meeting that it was very clear and also important for those who are joining the meeting by phone. But Cheryl Johnson had encouraged me to ask if Pam would head the countywide meeting. 3 times she said this and I said, why? And she said, well, you don't seem to be you're not tracking very well and you keep asking for what we're voting on to be stated. And then I realized it's to have her scrutiny of me and I think some other people in that meeting, because they've been, a little critical at times about what our area is asking for. Basically, we're chosen to be out in the Tulies and therefore we shouldn't have much stuff. And I just was wondering, Pam, if you wanted to be the countywide liaison. And also Gail, well, ask Pam that first.
This is new to me. It seems, well, first, Susanna, how do you feel about it? You have stepped up and volunteered your time very graciously to do that. And I don't want to step on your toes. I will defer to you if you wish to release or relieve yourself from that responsibility. Since we only have a few more meetings left, I think I could do it. But I'm going to leave that to you, Susanna, because I certainly don't want to say you haven't done a good job. I've never been to a countywide meeting, so I have no input onto how you have fit in or worked with the other people on the countywide group. Do you feel good about leaving that or not?
I'm ambivalent, but it is one less thing for me to do. And my poor brain does get a little fried. We started at 9 a.m. and I forgot when we left. Was it 4 p.m.? I'm definitely getting fried by 4 p.m.
And Gail, let me ask, we only have, I know our local groups only have 2 more meetings. Is the countywide the same? Is that on the same timeline?
No, they have an extended timeline, so they'll be meeting probably through May, I believe.
So it's a bigger commitment. Me a little, because this is really truly all new to me. So, what would my time? So we would meet as we are right now, our little group, for 2 more meetings after this one, and then if I did do the countywide, I would commit to 1 long day per month. Is that how it works?
That's how it's looking right now, Pam. Some of the days may be shorter, but I know that moving forward in October, at the end of this month, for example, our meeting is Goal 5. And if you remember, we took 6 months in our committees to talk about Goal 5. So they've got 1 meeting with our new schedule. It's going to be a long meeting, and they will be long days. And in fairness to Susanna, by the time 4 o'clock comes, everybody's fried. It's a very long meeting. It's a lot of brain work, and everybody's exhausted. So it's not just Susanna.
So my question, Gail, do you think that I'm stepping up to the plate enough to do that meeting?
I think you are. I don't know where Cheryl's coming from or when you had your conversation, because I know that wasn't at the meeting. But I know that at times even I have to tune out just to give myself a mental break during these meetings, because they are long, and your brain can only take in so much before you say, my brain needs a break. So I have not seen anything that is out of the ordinary. I think all of the members at times get off topic, and we even I do it. We go down little paths and they have our things that we want to talk about, and we all get a little sidetracked at times. But I think Andy does a really good job of keeping everybody moving forward and reining people back in when they go down the garden path somewhere where they shouldn't be going. So, and it's not just you. So.
Can I ask you one other question about those meetings, and that is it really getting necessary to write all the comments and emails, which would need probably be by the day before?
Andy had asked for that. I didn't know he was going to do that. It may help a bit because if people have had a chance to read some of the comments beforehand, and they do go to the board as well, everybody has maybe more of an understanding of where other people will be coming from at the meeting. But from a staff viewpoint, I don't need them beforehand. So, and you can send them afterwards or make your comments at the meeting.
Okay. Because also the chat between emails and chat and verbal, I think it worked fairly well. Okay. Well, let me keep thinking on it, and you too, Pam. Thank you.
I will just, let me know. The sooner you can let me know, the better, so that I can do some homework and try and get my head around the county-wide group and what would be expected or needed. So, but the decision is 100% yours, Susanna. Just let me know, please.
Well, let me do another meeting. And, Pam, if you can just sit in on that meeting, kind of look at all the stuff that we're reviewing and sit in, that would be good. And I have one other request, Gail. When there's a draft written up where a lot of information is being condensed, can the person who wrote up that draft add their name to it? So that if we have questions, because I had asked you a question in a draft, and I don't think you had written up that draft. And I think most of my concerns were addressed at the last meeting.
Okay. Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Thank you. Okay. I'm ready to go now for the meeting.
Okay. So you're okay with the meeting summaries from February and April, Susanna?
Yes, there was nothing I wrote down, and it's, as you say, it was so long ago. It's really hard to remember. But
Well,
nothing.
nothing jumped out at me. All right. I say we adopt those as written, and apparently we have no members of the public in the meeting, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we skip that. So now the agenda says review of the Seaside Rural Plan, but you said that was for both, really, right, Gail?
Yes, both plans are included in your packet. When I put the agenda together, I was thinking of just doing the one, but then I put both of them in the packet and didn't update the agenda. So we can just start moving through them and see where we get today.
And Pam,
which one do you?
We can start with Seaside Rural.
Yes, Susanna. Okay.
well, I had brought up at the last the countywide meeting about the Arch Cape group, the Southwest Coastal taking on Seaside Rural. And I really felt that reviewing the Seaside Rural Community Plan, again, Pam is probably far more versed in this plan. And so I was very glad that she's on the committee, because I don't feel that I was competent in a lot of the Seaside Rural presentations, the information. So Pam, I had asked that the Southwest Coastal, or at least take half of Seaside Rural. I'm okay with doing Hamlet. And there is not very many people just west of Hamlet. Do you know what I mean? If there's kind of a subgroup and we take Hamlet.
I feel if we were at the beginning of this process, I think that would have been good to talk about then. I still don't believe that coastal, like Arch Cape, has really anything in common with Highway 26 from Hamlet West. I think they fit better into our group because they are zoned small acreages. They're more rural. But it seems with only a short time left in this process, I think we're well beyond trying to change our boundaries. Maybe I'm incorrect there, but what do you think, Gail?
So I think that if the consensus is we want to look at this in more detail, I think we put that as a recommendation. I know that the board has talked about changing the boundaries of the planning areas as well, but they're looking to align with their commissioner districts. But there's nothing that would prevent us from making a recommendation in the community plan that says, Seaside Rural should be combined with Southwest Coastal, or a portion of Seaside Rural should go with Southwest Coastal and put the other with Elsie-Jewell.
And I also want to say, as I said earlier, Pam, I'm very glad that you are present, because I do feel that you probably know a lot more about Seaside Rural than I do. And so I'm fine with that. That's fine. Since nobody from Southwest Coastal has really stepped forward, I think what you say, Pam, is true. We should just carry on. As long as you can be at the meetings, Pam, it's great.
Thank you. We should. The more I've thought about it in terms of what we have in common, I think it's a better fit with our group than Southwest Coastal. They have completely different issues, or in a lot of ways, their issues are very different. So into the Seaside Rural, Susanna, are you there? Landscape, is that where we're starting? Policy 1, landscape units, Gail?
Well, we've already gone through and done the policy work. So what I really want to focus on over the next couple of meetings is the narrative that backs up those policies. So in the drafts I put together, you'll see highlighted in yellow where I've incorporated updates, corrected spelling, taken out obsolete language or things that have been completed or are no longer applicable. And then where the committee has made changes to existing policies or recommended new policies, those are also highlighted in yellow. And then there are some items that you'll see highlighted in blue, which are areas where staff needs to go back and do some additional research to update the data. So you'll see, for example, things like the fire department statistics or water connections or things like that. But probably the biggest thing that I can recommend the committee focus on this morning is we need to talk about our existing conditions and our future conditions. What's happening in Seaside Rural now, and what do we see happening in 20 years, so that we can put some more language in the plan to help support the policies that we're going to recommend. Does that make sense?
It does, and now I wish I would have printed this in color. I thought I was being smart and saving color ink, so I printed it in black and it won't load on my computer, so it's too slow. So I will look through here.
Yeah.
Tell us where the change is, the first colorized or highlighted thing is, please. Sorry about that.
So if you're in the full agenda package, this would be starting on page 9, and so that's the beginning of the plan. And then on page 12 of the agenda package is where we start getting into the yellow and blue highlights.
Now, also, but the page number at the bottom of the page is also a different page number, correct?
I don't think I put page
The
numbers on.
I have page numbers. Yes, you see number 1 at the bottom?
Oh yeah, that was, yeah, just ignore that number 1. Or we can use that. So number 1 of the Seaside Rural Plan, page 1.
Because that's what I referenced, because I could not find on my computer the paging of the packets, such as you have in your thumbnail.
Yeah.
It didn't, I was trying to, sometimes I'll have in a very bad gray page, you know, something of 90, right? 30 of 90 or something, but which is probably what's in your thumbnails. But anyway, yes, this is why page numbering is so important, I think, just so that we can talk about what we're seeing on a particular page. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we're on page 1 of the Seaside Rural Plan. So it's after the title page and the credit page and the table of contents.
And do you see that, Pam? I mean, it should just be at the bottom of your printed page.
Yeah,
Were you able
I do.
to print? Yeah, okay, good. So that's what we'll use. Good.
All right, so I put right up front 3 things that I really need some input on from the committee, which is what of the history of the Seaside Rural area do we want to note in our community plan? And then we want to talk about what's happening now in Seaside Rural and what's going to happen over the next 20 years. So we don't have to put everything in full sentences, but at least if we can get some points down so that next month I can bring back a more complete draft. So do we want to start with history?
Yes, please.
Okay, so what of the history of Seaside Rural should we be noting?
The corridor, the transportation that brought people, I don't know, there was a railroad at one time that brought, I think they called it the Daddy train. Mainly the men who were back in Port of the Beach in the summertime. So that whole corridor, and it follows existing 26 now or not, but that's been a major transportation corridor for logging and for access to the beach. And other than that, that's all that comes to my mind right off the top.
And add, oh, access to the beach. I would say tourism in general. The transportation, yes, and part of the transportation corridors for tourism from Portland. I mean, not just Portland, but
Between Portland and the coast.
yeah.
So in terms of logging, hold on, sorry, Pam. So in terms of logging, there's obviously a very long history of timber activity in Seaside Rural, as I understand it. But over the years, how has that changed, or has it not changed? And what impact has that had on the area in general?
I would say the use of mechanized logging machinery has cut down logging jobs needed, probably. Some of the tree harvesting machines can't go on the steep slopes, so I really can't tell you those statistics, but that's my understanding. Can I add one more thing on the transportation corridor? It's very important to be bringing supplies into the stores. You see a lot of trucks supplying the stores on 26.
Oh, true. Corridor. Absolutely. That is important. Thank you, Susanna. Yes.
And probably
as far
gas stations, energy supplies, I would say probably are on 26 more than Highway 30, especially for Seaside. I mean, oil, gas, etc.
I think that's kind of part of the supply chain needed to live on the coast or vacation on the coast, whether it's food or gasoline or electrical power corridors. As far as how logging has changed in the area, the only change I really see, because of our zoning, I think it's more populated along Highway 26, Highway 53, and Hamlet Road. But those homesteads or home sites really are along the roads. And once you're back away from the roads, I don't see a lot of change historically, because once you're outside of those residential zones, it is still predominantly probably F80 or AF, with forestry being the predominant use.
Okay, so let me ask another question. So in terms of, hi Don. So Donna Bing has joined us, Pam.
Hi, Donna. Hey, Don.
Okay. So another question. So over the years, since 1980, when this plan was first adopted, here we are in 2021, and obviously the way we communicate in terms of social media, internet, computers, email has changed globally, but has there been an impact, because Seaside Rural is still pretty limited in its broadband capacity, and by not being able maybe to fully participate in some of this social media stuff, does that have an impact on the community?
Certainly. I have personally seen it have an impact on property values. More and more people work from home. One of the first questions a potential buyer thinking of relocating to the area, but wanting some rural space around them, asks, is there high-speed internet available? And I know I had a listing in Hamlet that so many people wanted to buy, but once they found they couldn't get high-speed internet, they could not work from home there, and that decreased the property value quite a bit. That's a personal anecdote there. So yes, I think lack of connectivity, and there's still substantial cell phone dead zones or really poor zones. So it's not like you can even just forget internet and use a personal hotspot with your cell phone along 26.
Okay. So Don, just to kind of bring you up to where we're at, we're starting with our Seaside Rural Community Plan. And right now we're just trying to pull together some points, talking points of historically, since our comp plan was adopted in 1980, what are some of the changes that have happened or things of note historically that we want to put in the plan for just informational purposes. So if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, one of the main concerns Chinook has is I think it's blue highlighted on I believe it's page 26 of 80. Yeah, there it is. The second blue line.
Yeah. So Pam, since you're on the phone, so this will be page 9 in the Seaside Rural Plan, and it's a section below where it talks first about the Hamlet School and Mechanicsum Garden Club, and then the next sentence underneath that says there are no known Indian or other archaeological sites in the Seaside rural area. Okay, go ahead, Don.
Okay. Chinook Nation takes great exception to that statement, only because I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Palm Rose site in the Seaside area. It was a large village, Chinook or Clatsop Chinook village, that's been over the years decimated by looters, and we want to make sure that any development that happens when the soil is disturbed and an inadvertent discovery of Chinook remains, whether they be human or another type of artifact, that the Chinook Nation be made aware of the discovery, and then appropriate action needs to take place regarding the discovery, inadvertent discoveries. We have to emphasize the population before the Euro-Americans arrived, that the Clatsops inhabited a great variety of area within Clatsop territory, and so Clatsop Chinook are very sensitive to exclusions of area that's set up for development. Anyway, yeah, we concur that, or agree that there will be inadvertent discoveries of Chinook, Clatsop Chinook, using or utilizing the areas especially those around bodies of water, be it a small feeder creek to a large stream and river, like the Pomerose site.
And I want to echo what Don is saying in that after the 96 flood, my property in Jewell had probably fall encampments harvesting salmon coming up. There's lots and lots of flaking of tools. And after the 96 flood, around probably just a half a mile up and down the river on much higher ground, I found flaked rocks all throughout along the Nehalem. I cannot conceive of that the Nicanicum, all the feeder creeks into the ocean at Seaside would not have the same thing. They were very rich lands for many reasons, and since the Native Americans have been there for thousands of years, they would be all through the area.
Also, we would be more specific and just say Clatsop, Chinook instead of Native American. Those our ancestors were specific and to the occupation of the Clatsop lands.
So on that page, the blue highlight where it says there are no known, that should probably, or you're suggesting that statement should be removed and replaced with Clatsop Chinook sites may occur throughout the area, or I'm not phrasing that properly, but is that the general idea?
Yes, because even though well, that statement just is totally erroneous. The original, we know that areas were used for harvesting and gathering, and in those areas, people would have tools, would have use of the area. I'll give an example. For instance, inside Fort Stevens proper, there's a large grove of crabapple trees. Those just didn't appear. They were a part of the horticulture that the Clatsop Chinooks used so that they could sustain. Be able to harvest and sustain their living conditions there within the old Fort Stevens area that used to be a village site. And
so
it just goes to show. I know from personal experiences that people have found fish hook bones or fish hooks made out of bones, spearheads, fish spearheads, arrowheads, fishing weights, if they know what they're looking for as far as fishing weights are concerned. Some people just, a rock is a rock. But anyway, located these from small feeder creeks. For instance, I'm going out on a limb here. Clutchie Creek is an example. But I won't be specific about where on Clutchie Creek, but that's an example area where you could walk through there and you say, well, there's no known Indian village site here or whatever, but temporary fishing camps and gathering camps, food gathering camps were always located wherever there's supplies of fresh water. That's a fact. So inadvertent discoveries are going to happen as long as development takes place in one way or another, especially around scenic areas. Shouldn't be, but there probably will be. But we need to understand that the Chinook Nation, the Clatsop Chinook Nation, needs to have some kind of enforcing situation like NAGPRA, where inadvertent discoveries of human remains, of encampments, even village sites. There are village sites in that rural area, and many of these have just been automatically burnt down, or the plank houses, the wood from the plank houses had some value in that they were already repurposed, and then were repurposed by Euro-Americans that it could use for their barns or their uh, 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 posts for their lands or fencing, whatever. But yeah, we take great exception to that original, and that's why we need to have something in there to protect the interests of our contemporary Clatsop Chinook and honoring our commitment to our ancestors.
What kind of wording do you suppose we could put in there? Because these are very valid. So glad you joined the call, Don. These would have never occurred to me. So thank you for your input.
Okay.
You're welcome.
So Pam, I've been revising as Don's been talking. So the new language would say, Clatsop Chinook or other archaeological sites exist in the Seaside rural area. It is likely that as development occurs, there will be inadvertent discoveries of areas, particularly around bodies of water, where the Clatsop Chinook utilized sites for temporary fish or food gathering camps. Information regarding inadvertent discoveries of human remains, village sites, and encampments should be reported to the Chinook Indian Nation and the State Historic Preservation Office.
Thank you, Gail.
No, you're welcome.
That's wonderful. Very well worded, I think, and very concise. Thank you.
It's probably
Any thoughts, Pam?
It's probably wordsmithing, but I would take out likely, and it would read it, and it is as development occurs, there will be inadvertently discoveries. Yeah, as development occurs, there will be inadvertent discoveries. I would like it that way, because as Don had said, in my experience along the Nehalem, I mean, all of the waterways were utilized.
Okay, done.
Thank you.
What's next on historic thoughts, Gail?
Well, really, I'm leaving that up to you as a committee to decide what's important to note about the history over the past 40 years that brought us here. And if we think we've covered the important points, let me, get back up to my page here. So, so Don, over the past 40 years, well, actually some of this goes back further, so we can go back even further than 40 years. So from Clatsop Chinook viewpoint, what important things, I know we talked about the encampments and things in that section below, but what other highlights do you think that we should be hitting for historic perspective on this area?
Oh, yeah. The yellow highlighted more of gas supply to Highway 26 compared to Highway 30.
Yeah. That,
Um, Speaking for Clatsop Chinook, we would take slight exception to that because of the switch from fossil fuel to battery or electric cars now. You have to consider charging stations and things like that rather than just solely on fossil fuel, which we hope at one point will not scar up the land.
Yes, I was counting, I think there are either 6 or 8 Tesla charging stations that have been in the Seaside shopping mall for some time, outlet mall. But the statement more oil and gas supply on 26 compared to Highway 30, I'm not sure I said I wasn't sure. You might want to just check in on that before making a statement.
I don't know if we that specific. We could just say that Highway 26 is the main supply corridor for all goods or for goods and services required at the coast. To me, that's open enough that could mean at the time that, yes, the gasoline trucks, the fuel trucks, the tankers still come over, but, as we transition away from fossil fuels, other things will be needed over here. Gail, your thoughts about wording there?
Yeah, I like your statement, Pam, about how Highway 26 is the main supply corridor for supplies and I guess fuels coming into the coast area. I think that will kind of summarize it nicely.
Yeah, that covers the present and hopefully the future as well, without being too specific, because none of us know exactly what the future will look like.
Okay, so I'm going to take
So have we
some of
moved
these.
on from?
Yeah, I think you're heading
sorry.
where I'm heading, Pam, over to existing conditions.
Right. So I wanted to make sure from Don and Susanna that are we complete in our discussion of historical things to put in the plan before we move to existing, and answering my own question, and Don, you may weigh in on this. Historically, areas along these waterways were used, as you said, for fishing. Is this the appropriate place to put in how rich with salmon the rivers used to be and how important that, how life-sustaining that was?
Yes, there's a lot of the villages that were close to harvesting places for the salmon had the I don't know how you could, the pronoun or the spelling or the saying of Nia or Ni, which is basically a place where people gathered to pound dried fish, dried salmon, salmonids, pound it into a powder, and that was the base for using pemmican for fall and winter use when resources were tight because of inclement weather. So yeah, there were always places for the processing of fish that was used in that respect, and also for trade for goods that were more readily available upriver or further up the coasts of Washington State to British Columbia, and then also the southern tribes to the Umpqua and Yurok to the south. The sea trades were prosperous because at the time the salmon runs that predominated the northern coastal area of Oregon, and as well as the speaking of the Nicanicum and Neawana, and then also the Neacoxie and the Lower Columbia were the greatest runs of the time, and they exceeded those that are that have been historically high, like the Copper River in Alaska and the Klamath River, or even the Sacramento River in California. So yeah, there's not only a reference to the historical need for a food supply, but also a economic and or viable economic trade that provided wealth and security for the Clatsop Chinook people.
I think that's very important, and I'm glad before we moved on from the historical section that this came up, because those fish runs and the abundance of clean water, both for fish and for consumption, was very important. And had these areas not had the fish runs, they probably wouldn't have been utilized or as important as they were. So I think that probably should be in the historical section, some reference to the abundance of water that was, the proper temperature and cleanliness and all to sustain the salmonid runs. Can we put that in there, Gail?
Also to note that the salmonid runs did help fertilize a huge viable ecosystem. The trees and plants really thrived, the native plants, from the carcasses of those fish, and they in turn provided a unique ecosystem for elk and deer and bear and cougar, the other land animals. And this also was provided a byproduct of fur and meat and other items that were utilized by our Clatsop Chinook people and ancestors, and they also had great trade value as well as nutritional and food resources.
And Pam, I realize you can't see it.
Yeah.
Gail is once again, I think, capturing it very well, what Don has been saying. Do you agree, Don? Do you see what Gail is writing? Can you see that?
Yes,
And
I do.
Do you feel she's capturing it well?
Very good, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes, I think, yes.
I mean, an example, a good example is the concerning elk, for instance, are clamins. That's the term for the processed hide of an elk. Clamins were of the elk hide were very, very durable, wearable garments, and these clamins were very well. They were very expensive. The Clatsop Chinook, because of the processing, they always wanted I would call top dollar or top trade, and they would negotiate very high to sell off the clamins that were harvested from the elk. And we could see these clamins going as far as on the other side of the Rocky Mountains, and as far north as British Columbia, maybe even Alaska. I can't verify that, but definitely to British Columbia, and of course all points south. While the elk here historically have not had much fat in their diet and in their physical makeup, they did possess a unique hide that was totally different from the hides, say, in the Rocky Mountains, the Rocky Mountain variety elk. But the clamins were sometimes used as storage for valuables and things like that, because they were just so robustly hardy. I mean, durable, versus the hides from the interior. And I'm just saying, like, for instance, well, when they lack the meat here, I mean, Lewis and Clark's journals will even say that they had to constantly eat meat. Well, there was no fat content that would satiate their need for that, energy to keep their bellies full. So I know here, dried elk meat and the clamins were always traded east into the interior for instance, a bear and even elk meat from the Rockies, from those herds, because they contained more fat in their meats rather than the ones here. I don't have the biological information on that particular fact of the fat content between the interior animals and the animals that were in Clatsop Chinook territory, but nonetheless, it did happen, and it was a unique, huge trading system. Actually, it kept a lot of peace among different tribes. Even some of the notoriously warring ones found time to trade using another tribe as a go-between, the Clatsop Chinooks and their, like, for instance, Quinault. But historically, there's been more friendly trading going on than there has been animosity, like some of those Plains Indians or even the Eastern Indians had in their territories. That's why you never heard of any really super great wars between one tribe and another here. Oh, you had a raiding party now and then between Clatsop Chinook and the Quinault, but that's about the only real historical animosity between two tribes that's recorded. All others have been just amicable as far as getting along with trading and then arranging marriages between tribes to gain peace or keep the peace.
So Don, thank you for that. What I heard at the beginning of that, which I hadn't really put together in my brain, was, we talked about abundant clean water for human consumption and to sustain the salmon, but then you brought up the decaying carcasses and how they fed into the ecosystem. And so possibly in the historical reference was that the Seaside rural area contained not only healthy, abundant, clean water, but an intact ecosystem. I don't know if that's appropriate to put in there, Gail, but I think that's a very valid point at how interconnected everything is, how those salmon fed the soil, thus the vegetation that sustained the larger animals. Is that something we can include in there?
We can, and I have noted that.
So I just wanted to say, you got to realize that when our ancestors were processing their daily lives, they were very astute as to the repurposing, coyotes repurposing, or the creators repurposing of the salmonids, realizing that they would come up and do their duty to propagate another run of fish after another run of fish after another run of fish. So these were really sites. When this process was going on, there was a lot of reverence left to those fish, and those fish were never, I shouldn't say were never, I mean, if you were starving, you would go, but other than that, those fish were treated with great reverence as far as their being allowed to keep their destiny with Coyote and the Creator, and that being to keep the species alive and viable. So even potable water was always above where these fish were using as their nursery areas, and so those little tiny creeks and things like that nature were very important for freshwater use, consumption, and water that was inhabited by the spawning salmonids was pretty much left alone and allowed to continue the process. And basically, because they were treated with a more reverent purpose, so that they wouldn't be disturbed, they most likely, we have songs and dances that honor that special gift of life, of repurposing life, that was important to our people, our ancestors. And today, even the contemporaries, we have song and dance, that mainly song, but and also dance, that respect the life force of the salmonids and their contribution to keeping everything viable as a circle of life.
Wow, Gail, I wish we could take Don just said and put it in the plan, because that's so grounding and so sobering and something we all need to hear. I know we can't put all that in there, but anything you can extract from that for the historical section would be wonderful.
Okay. Yeah, I've been taking notes, Pam. I know I probably have not captured everything, but I've tried to capture as much as I could. So we will put it in our next draft, and we can go back and reread it and see what I wasn't able to capture.
Okay, thank you. So anything else Don or Susanna about the historical perspective of the Seaside rural area? Because I do know we have to move on to the next section before too long.
I thought of another thing, and that's the history of the tsunamis. It goes way back. I mean, the last one was 1700. There was another earthquake in 1500 that did not generate a tsunami. And I think that even the large tsunamis over the last 10,000 years should be noted. I had commented another meeting, and I think I need to say it, that there is a theory of earthquake clustering, and the large tsunamis seemingly come at the end of that clustering, and we may be towards the end of the clustering, and I would hate to be like the Japanese in the last bad earth tsunami, where their evacuation towers were inundated because they ignored historical information of past higher tsunamis. And I want to say that, let me just finish this thing, that the Gorda Plate, the southern third of the Cascadia subduction zone, has a release cycle of 150 years to, shoot, I'm forgetting the end. It's but the average is 250 years. We are past the average of the Gorda Plate release. We are coming to the end. Oh, it is 300 years. So in 2030, we will be at the end of that release cycle, and the probability is really high for a Gorda Plate release, and that release can result in three things: a total Cascadia subduction zone rip out, a partial one of just the Gorda Plate, which might be felt as a 6 or 7 earthquake. The earthquake people are not sure because of soil type. And the third, which they said, is a partial release up and down the whole Cascadia subduction zone, which might result in a 7 or 8 point release off the coast here.
That's an interesting, Don, what were you going to say?
Well, I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to interrupt, Shauna. Our cousins, the Shoalwater in Tokeland, Washington, are in the process of erecting the vertical platforms. The designs are quite unique, I think, and I don't believe they go along the lines of what the Japanese have had or utilized. But in any event, they're extending their help in getting these verticals platforms into our Willapa Chinook area, the base center area, to provide some kind of relief protection against future tsunamis. And I know there was discussion, and I missed that, unfortunately, that vertical towers be utilized in Clatsop land. And I think that's definitely a good idea. Our ancestors did experience the horrific what was it, in the 1700s, whatever that was, the coastal watered communities did more so than the interiors. The interiors survived all of that, but it was a lesson learned not to take Mother Nature for granted and build more appropriately, and in doing so, prevented more loss of life for our Clatsop ancestors. Their interior communities survived more of the problems. I know I was came across some readings from some elders who have long passed, who commented on the Bay Ocean community that used to exist there north of Tillamook there, and now has been eaten up by the ocean. That building on sand like that was all folly. So, with the exception of the one village that was displaced 2 times, and then the 3rd time there in Fort Stevens, I don't know. It just we should be more cognizant and fearful of anything tsunami wise. That's for sure. When we're planning and developing or not developing.
And I really agree with that. Thank you, Don. Gail, I don't know the boundaries of Seaside Rural, and if, because we are talking about Seaside Rural right now, how close to the coast we ought, it's appropriate or not to put something in there regarding tsunamis. I know tsunamis will take the path of least resistance, which is usually run up a river. But again, without knowing the boundaries, is this applicable to Seaside Rural, Gail?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Pam. There is a little bit of coastline in the Seaside Rural area, and that's down around the Tillamook Head area. And so, in my limited knowledge, I believe it's a much higher area. Probably the tsunami would not be an issue, but if there's any potential for coastal erosion or landslides following a severe earthquake, that would be probably the bigger concern perhaps than a tsunami.
Though the Nicanicum, what's along Highway 26? The Nicanicum?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the tsunami roared up there quite a long way, because the elevation of the Nicanicum as it goes up Highway 26, there's not a large elevation rise on the coastal plain. And I also want to say, Gail, the up above, well, you finished that writing. And I don't know if the other rivers go out of the urban boundary of Seaside, but if they do, again, the tsunami affected all those rivers. And of course, and mostly in the urban growth boundary of Seaside, that will be possibly 6 to 7 feet lower. And probably Highway 101, but it's depend on how the formations of the plates, the tectonic plates are, as to how much of subsidence area there will be, which increases the power of the tsunami destruction. And going forward, it would then probably be marshy, even, summer 101 and 26 after the subsidence. And Gail, above where you were taking notes on what I said wasn't correct. The earthquake in 1700, so now on 2020, it was 300 years. And I forget the end of the release cycle for the Gorda plate release cycle. But all I know is in 2030, it's the end of the most, in 10,000 years, the Gorda plate hasn't gone past, but would be now coming up 2030. And the subsidence, I'm assuming, would be either the total cascading, so we know with a total release, we get subsidence, and even if there's partial release, zonal release, there would be some kind of subsidence. If only the Gorda plate releases and it doesn't trigger the other two events, I'm assuming there would not be subsidence.
Okay, Suzanne, I'm still not 100% clear. So in 2030, what happens, or what milestone do we approach?
Well, there's a time frame of the Gorda plate release cycle, and it's the average is 250 years, and it happened 321 years ago. And I just know back when I was studying all of this, that 2030 was the end time. No, wait, maybe it's 2050. I need to look into that, Gail. I can look into that. Not 2030, I think it's 2050 is the average of the Gorda plate release cycle. It's just, we're kind of a ticking time bomb, and 2050 is over 10,000 years. By 2050, the Gorda plate would have released. But then when the Gorda plate releases, there's three different scenarios.
Because we were on vertical area and we're moving to current concerns, maybe we would put something in there, like little is known about the effects of past tsunamis and earthquakes on the area, but future planning and decisions should take into account the likelihood of a large earthquake. Is that appropriate? I agree that we shouldn't ignore it, but I don't think we can get too specific. But I think in looking forward, we should have something in there about taking all that into account when making decisions.
I think it's very important, and I would say a large earthquake and subsidence. Gail, up right above there. The subsidence is going to hugely affect Seaside and Seaside rural along the coast, and definitely is it Dr. Goldfinger out of Dogami? Dogami it would be good to ask Dogami about what I said, or I could reach out to them. I have in the past a couple of times. And it's from Chris Goldfinger, I think is his, who had the 10,000-year timeline, which has been highly published.
There's a lot of reaching effects. If the Cascadia subduction zone quake happens, then our transportation corridor from Portland to the coast would be likely disrupted for a very long time. Drinking water supplies would be disrupted. So it's almost a whole separate topic. But it is very important for both Seaside Rural and Elsie-Jewell.
And Gail, can I get back to you about some of the details on the Gorda plate cycle?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Also,
I can't see you're writing something, Gail.
I'm sorry, Pam, I didn't hear you.
I can't see. So are you trying to take all of our thoughts and condense them into cohesive sentences for us?
I wouldn't say they're all sentences. I'm mainly taking notes right now so that I can flush them out for our next draft next month. I just really want to capture the ideas.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
The other thing that I would probably ask about is how much of the tsunami settlement that they've looked in up the Nicanicum and up into the east. But I think where does Seaside Rural start in relationship to the hills above Seaside? Because your map is only orange and green, it doesn't show topography. So I don't know if the Seaside Rural is only in the highlands or if it goes down to the coastal plain all west of the urban growth boundary.
Yeah, so Seaside Rural basically comes down along the Tillamook Head through Ecola State Park and then wraps around the city of Cannon Beach. So it will pick up some of that coastal area, but that's the only coastal area that it picks up.
Right, but what I'm talking about is on the west edge of the Seaside urban growth boundary, the whole north and southwestern edge. Does that western edge, does it go into the coastal plain, or is it only where the Coast Range starts going up and is mostly timberland? But the Seaside School is, did they change the urban growth boundary to include the Seaside School, or has the Seaside School?
I think they took a goal exception, but I'd have to check. I don't know if they've expanded the UGB out there. But that whole area is actually in the Clatsop Plains planning area. So you don't have to worry about it.
So the orange is Clatsop Plains.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else about existing conditions?
I'm not totally, because we don't have soil maps as a part of this. So, you have the alluvial lowlands, and then the flood zones are also important. And I know in planning you have the the 100-year floods. I'm assuming that all along the Nicanicum there is a 100-year floodplain.
Yeah, floodplain, floodway.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so you have basaltic highlands and the development of mineral resources like gravel being important. And I agree with you as long as the gravel extraction is not impacting historic sites, the Clatsop Chinook sites, or that the Clatsop Chinook sites are, that there's outreach over them. So I wouldn't just generically saying any basaltic highlands are, I want to say, fair game for mineral extraction, like gravel, which I think is our biggest mineral extraction resource in Clatsop County. And it's an important one. And added to what you're typing, so Pam, she just mentioned the Clatsop archaeological cultural sites, but to add the natural zones that are important. And down below you have a lot of things that are important goals for the natural zones. And I think they're probably well covered. Would you say further down, Gail? Is natural zones the right terminology? Nature's, I forgot now.
Yeah, it's natural. It's one of our 6 comprehensive plan designations. So we have development, which is the most intense. And then we have rural lands, which would be the RA1 to 510 zones. Then we've got conservation forest lands, conservation other resources, natural, and there's a 6th one that I am missing. Rural agricultural lands. So that's kind of how we base our zoning. So if your designation in the comp plan, say, is conservation forest lands, then your zoning is either going to be agriculture forest or it's going to be forestry 80 with that 80-acre minimum lot size.
Right.
So we're building up here. But yeah, so we do have a lot of natural policies, I know.
I'm kind of passionate about protecting forest lands, but I'm also very concerned over flooding, tsunamis, and right now I think a lot of rural seaside housing is along Highway 26, which is very vulnerable to, am I correct, Gail, to flooding and also in the tsunami map?
Yeah, 26 itself isn't so bad for the flooding. There are a few areas, but landslides would be probably a more concern. And we sort of went through this exercise with ODOT because they recently came in for permits for their construction that they're doing out there now. And they did have to deal with both flood and landslide, but landslide was definitely the bigger concern.
I'm just
Gail?
thinking as you go east in along Highway 26, most of the houses are between 26 and the Nicanicum River. Isn't that right, Pam? And it's those houses that
They're on both sides of the road. They are on both sides of the road. Don, did you have something?
Yes. Back on that fish and wildlife, I just remembered something that in my notes under birds. why isn't the marbled murrelet not listed?
Oh, good point.
Yep.
Interesting to say, the marbled murrelet is a bird that was greatly admired and maybe even revered by our southern Clatsop Chinooks. The mere fact that they relied on the ocean to do all of their business and stuff, as far as feeding, but the propagation had to take place within their great forests. So it was a unique thing, and I wish I could remember the phrase, but it would be like the thunderbird of the ocean. It kind of a remarkable connection between them, and but I just noticed that in my notes that it was not listed under birds.
Okay, and I did that. Add that in.
Could we
Thank you.
see that? Okay, thank you.
Well, while we're there in those lists, I didn't see mountain beaver. I'm fond of mountain beaver. They're a really ancient mammal species. It's very common, and forestry is trying to kill them off madly.
Did you know that the so-called the mountain beaver? I don't have the Chinook jargon for it, the Wawa, but they shoes for our babies and young children were made from their hide when they were harvested.
Yay, mountain beavers.
Yeah, they protected the feet of our children. I wish I had a pair that I could hold on to. They're far and few in the collections of our elders. Hopefully, we'll get some for our future museum and or historical reference community. But yes, mountain beaver were very important, very important resource as far as putting shoes on our kids.
Can you just reference mountain beaver, or do you need the Latin name? I think it's Aldontia is the family or the genus.
Yeah.
I can look it up. Be more specific. I'm bringing that from some depths of my memory.
The Latin name is there's the Chinook name for the mountain beaver is extracted from a part of the Latin name for it. I don't have the reference handy right now to get the exact Clatsop Chinook name for that. But it really isn't it isn't a beaver, even though it lives in the mountain. But yeah, they're being systematically eradicated by the foresters. But they have a great purpose. They aerating the soil allowed for good berry growth. You know, like huckleberries and blueberries, and native blackberries. Part of that circle again of life.
That's right. Everything has a purpose. They aerated the soil under one corner of my house enough that it was starting to sink. I know how well they aerate, and I just put peppermint oil down there, and they went away. So that worked quite well without harming them, just making it unpleasant for them to hang out under my house.
I know that in the smaller huts and storage units that were built by our ancestors, they used cedar oil, saturated cedar oil, saturated to keep from digging underneath, even other rodents too.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I know cedar closets and such is still in use. So, Gail, were you able to add the marbled murrelet and the mountain beaver to that list?
Yes, I did, Pam.
Thank you.
Oh, and I don't see the list now of the way. Does it include that red squirrel? I don't know the name of it. That's throwing fir cones on my new metal roof with much noise. And it's a good year for fir cones. They're really busy. They're so cute.
Okay. I added red
Yeah.
squirrel as well.
All right. So, back to the soils, which you had commented also in the Jewell Elsie area as well as Seaside Rural about soil saturation. And in my experience, when you're out of the flood zones, that's really not an issue that the soils get so saturated. I mean, it can be an issue for landslides, but the sense of a really soggy, saturated soil when you get above floodplain has not been my experience in Jewell. And I'm wondering, Pam, what do you think?
There are lots that have probably 5 to 12 feet below the surface a very thick layer of gray clay. And that does not percolate water. So in times of heavy rainfall, I know from my own house, you would look at it and think, oh, it's very well drained. But in times of heavy rainfall, I have lakes everywhere. And until I had to drill a well, I didn't know how much gray clay and how thick the layer of gray clay underlying my property was. So I think there is a lot of potential for very saturated soils due to that impervious layer of gray clay.
Okay, thank you. And let's see. Can I just make one more comment on Seaside? I realize we're getting late and I do have quite a bit on Jewell area. So again, on Highway 26, it's commented about fog lines, page 14. And again, in the Jewell Elsie area, Highway 103 really needs fog lines, but as well as 202, but there's no room for much of Highway 103 for bicycle lanes. There really is no shoulder of the road. And it came up, I just had on page 14, Highway 103 fog lane. Anyway, maybe it wasn't added to the fog lanes where 202 was.
Okay, I've added in Highway 103 there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Maybe if we holler long enough, ODOT will paint them on. I don't have anything else for the Seaside one.
So Gail, we were doing current and then future issues that we foresaw. Was that correct?
Yeah, I think you touched on some of the future conditions. For example, impacts from a future tsunami, earthquake, maybe not so much tsunami, but definitely earthquake and cutting off the supply chains. So I think that's one thing. Trying to think what else.
I keep coming back to an abundant and temperature appropriate water for human consumption, ecosystem, and to sustain the salmon. I think as we see things getting warmer, that it's very important that we protect our water in the future.
Pam, how much of rural Seaside had water issues because of the dry summer? You know, the whole Jewell Elsie area has had some issue. Many wells have dried up in Jewell School too. What do you know of Seaside rural?
I don't know. I know the company that, since my well is pretty close to dry, I'm paying to have water delivered about once a month right now, and he says it's by far his busiest year ever. I don't know where all he goes. He comes way out of Clatsop or Rainier, but I haven't asked him specifically where he goes. I mean, he talks about Birkenfeld, Jewell, Elsie, but I don't know if he goes to Hamlet. I don't know if many people even know there's a water delivery service available. So I can't answer your question. I haven't heard anything specific about Seaside Rural and water. Connie might have a better idea if she joins us next meeting.
And Gail, would it be appropriate, to me, that's really good data, if somebody could talk to the delivery man and find out more? I know that, she's the chair of the Southwest Planning Commission. My brain stopped on her name. She emailed people wanting to know about dry springs, and I think it'd be a really good data resource to talk to that fellow who's delivering water.
I will ask him. I'm supposed to talk to him to schedule my next water delivery. So I will ask him, if I'll just ask him for his perspective for the last few years, if he's delivering more water and where.
That would be
Gail?
really helpful. Yeah, Don.
Seaside proper draws its water from the South Fork of the Nicanicum River, and the South Fork is in Seaside Rural, right?
I don't know, but I would suspect so. So
Oh,
let me put that
well,
on the chat.
No, it might be in the Clatsop Plains.
the South Fork of the.
Or you know what? I bet it goes into both.
It's really far up on the Nicanicum main line.
That's true. Yes, you're probably, the water extraction site probably is Seaside Rural.
Well, one of the concerns we've had is the extraction of water to the point where there's no running water in the main stem of the Nicanicum during the summer months. I think Seaside has got above ground tanks, holding storage tanks. Is that something that we should consider expanding so as to help mitigate some of the water drawdown that impairs the fish, impairs the salmonids that are in the Nicanicum? Maybe above ground storage wells or containers for Jewell, Elsie, South Seaside, rural, that might be appropriate in the future, considering the impact of climate change is upon us now.
So Don, are you looking for?
Elsie-Jewell. Go ahead, yeah.
No, go ahead, Pam.
Oh, I was just telling Don that Elsie, with the exception of a few small community systems, everyone here is self-sufficient on water, meaning they have either a spring, rain harvest, or a well. So there is no community supply out here. I don't know. Seaside City Water runs about 3 or 4 miles out Highway 26. I know Edgewater Terrace, that area is on Seaside Public Water. But shortly after that, it transitions to everybody having their own system. But personally, I'm a big fan of everyone having storage tanks on their property to prevent drawdown in the dry summer months, and which will then harm the fall runs. I know I put in 2 large storage tanks, and that's why I'm able to get water. You can come in and fill my storage tanks. Gail?
Yes.
And I say yes also. I have a huge tank from the logging camp days, and it's really, I'm barely doing any pulling out of it, flushing the toilet now with rainwater. And yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. And Don, to go back to your statement, were you looking or thinking about the city of Seaside also adding storage tanks to their system? Was that, did I understand correctly?
Yes, only to decrease the severe drawdown on the Nicanica mainstream. It's just really discouraging to see very little water running at all in the mainstream, and I know that greatly impacts the salmonids and even our lamprey and crawfish populations suffer from the increased stream temperature because of the drawdowns. And I just don't see an end to Seaside's growth, and their extraction of the Nicanicum water can only go so far, and it's really going to be worse down the road unless they get something to help mitigate that by having some kind of storage system that they can draw down during the low water months, during the summer months.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to say somewhere in all of that, you listed in the Jewell Elsie area water systems. And is it appropriate right now to say ones that you missed?
Sure.
So, and I don't know the name, but I know once I gave you a link to the state group that registers the water systems. And there is one around, I mean, there's Camp 18 and Elsie. I don't know where Elsie gets their water. But there is at least one along there. that I don't think was on your list, and Jewell School wasn't on your list. And I would think Jewell School should be notated. And there may have been one other one, but you know, if you just go into that link of the state agency that monitors water, drinking water, if it's important to notate what we have now, or at least just
I don't
notate.
think Jewell School, well, I don't think Jewell School or Camp 18 are considered community water systems. They serve a particular purpose. Maybe they are monitored by the state for potability. That I don't know. But what I thought that list was about was systems that serve more than one home. Like there's a system that Gordon used to run that serves Evergreen Acres and Vine Mate. And then there's Elderberry and the Halem Home Site system. I thought that was the purpose of that list. But
Well,
if
I know
you think those others be included, Gail, go for it.
Yeah.
Well, I
So
do think that there are homes in both of probably where Camp 18 draws the water. Just Gordon Smith's home probably gets that water. But I know Jewell School has a variety of houses for superintendent and teachers. Some on the hill above Jewell School, 2 of them along the road. Are there still 2 maybe? But yes. So it is really not a lot of houses, but Jewell School does serve other houses. I mean, houses than past just the facility.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, it's nitpicky, but I think it's important to mention those 2. Or the link of, or just put in the link to the statewide agency.
yeah, it'd be nice if we could do that, Susanna, but the state frowns upon that because our comprehensive plan is fixed in time on the date it gets adopted. And so if we link to data and the state agency changes that data, we have to go back and update our comprehensive plan every time they do that.
Oh,
So
okay.
they tend
Yeah.
to frown upon that.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Can I go on to some other things I have notes on?
On
Sure, we
Seaside
got
Rural,
Oh, wait a minute, I gotta plug I'm gonna be plugging in my computer. Yeah, so I just wanted to comment, I'm sorry, no, on the Jewell Elsie. Because we're running out of time.
Gail, what's easiest for you so far with this meeting to Seaside Rural?
right. So
Is it jumping around too much to jump over now? Would you like to save Elsie?
let's see. Yeah. Does anybody have any other comments or corrections on this first draft of Seaside Rural? Okay, sounds like not. So we've got 4 minutes left, so we may want to save Elsie-Jewell for next month, or we can cover what we can in the next 4 or 5 minutes or so.
I can just
Personally, my brain, go ahead, Susanna.
Oh, just give me a minute for some notes that if you can just, before we go into the next meeting, Gail, that I think Lee Wooden Park got left out in a couple of places under parks. Sports Acres no longer exists as such, is my understanding. And then Fishhawk Lake, because they have water and sewer, has a list of accepted uses. I have page 13. Not too and especially 3 and 4 uses, but that's all my notes say. And then somewhere I don't think you have the Elk Preserve, the Wilson unit south of Highway 26. So I have page 16, 3.d, point not applicable along 26. Oh, no, anyway. And also there's on table 1, existing policies, open space, policy 1. I would say most all of the Jewell Elsie area is big game habitat. So you can't really design housing creation around the elk. And then under community development policy 2, I would include runoff issues of more commercial development, maybe, because commercial development out in the Jewell area is a lot of it is also for logging companies, and just if they include more, and just not just logging, but places that we've talked in the past that store toxic stuff, or you have a lot of gas, oil, diesel, so runoff issues and floods and things need to be addressed. And policy 5, it limits home occupations. And personally, I would not want to see the limitation of what types of home occupations if they're non-polluting. I think we need all sorts for the inhabitants out where we live. Things like parking, accessibility. There are a lot of requirements for home occupations that I think are fine, but not the limitation of what types. And that's it for me. Thank you. Oopsie, 1 minute left.
Hey, thanks, Susanna. I may email you or call you if I have some questions.
Okay. If nobody has anything to say, I do want to make another comment, though we're at noon. Can I comment?
I'm fine with that.
Pam? My comment would be that early on, a couple years ago, in the early meetings of Elsie-Jewell, a lot of the local people were saying that there were a lot more houses out there that have disintegrated, been taken down, burnt down, and not rebuilt. So during the logging boom of the 30s and 40s, lots and lots of small houses were built that no longer exist. And I think that's important.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll make a note of that.
That density, that's true. I mean, we had a post office, we had a school, so certainly density, residential density was higher at one time, kind of like gold rush towns, but this was a logging town, so to speak. Right. Anything else before we adjourn the meeting?
Oh, Pam?
Yes.
Or excuse me, not Pam. I'm sorry, Gail.
Yes.
I know this is not part of the meeting, but I just wanted to let you know that I tried to get a hold of Julia Decker, try to get on the Walewski, Lewis and Clark meeting, the last one, and was not able to connect. I didn't have the proper connection to it. And the reason I wanted to get on there was to speak to an issue about low-head hydro projects within Clatsop Chinook land, and one specifically aimed at Youngs River Falls. But I wanted to address that at another meeting after consulting with Chinook Culture Committee and the council.
Okay. Our next meeting with Lewis and Clark, Don, is going to be October 28th at 6 p.m.
Okay.
And I'll make sure
Thank you.
that you get that link in meeting announcement.
Please, yeah, I really have to address that problem. That for some reason that well, the Waleski Loop, I don't know where it came up, but I saw it in the notes, and so I wanted to address that because I thought we had already taken care of it at Clatsop Plains and rural Seaside.
All right.
And would you send it to me also?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. And Susanna, will you please let me know what your thoughts are on being on the countywide? I know you said you wanted to go through one more meeting. I don't know when that is, but do let me know as soon as you decide what you want to do, please.
I will. What I'd like you to do is just, if you can, to sit in the meeting to get a flavor of it before you decide. I mean, I will also think on it, and if you would send Gail the link for the countywide meeting. So you can at least
Yes,
just
I
look
would
at
appreciate
the
that.
whole agenda package, Pam.
Okay.
I will
Gail,
do
when
that.
is that next countywide? Okay, when is that?
It's going to be October 26th, which is a Tuesday, and that'll be at 9 a.m.
If there's nothing else, I would adjourn the meeting.
I'm good.
All right. Thank